Back in 2019, Vivian Medrano released the pilot for Hazbin Hotel, a crude comedy set in hell oriented around the self-claimed princess of hell trying to make a place to rehabilitate sinners to get them transferred to heaven, in a startlingly poor understanding of how a concept like hell even works in the first place. Then it got pitched to network after network and remained in development hell for years, while Medrano started producing Hell of a Boss around the same time, a completely independent spin-off trying to be the animated version of The Office. I watched one episode of Hell of a Boss, thought, okay, neat, and then never watched it again. But according to people who I respect, the series tried to have a serialized plot with character drama, and that struck me as fucking hysterical when one of the characters is just someone's persona. You know me, I cringe when a series that is set up for comedy decides halfway through it wants to be an adult drama for grown-ups now, but with Medrano's work, it's something I begrudgingly tolerate because, hey, at least she decided to nut up and just make an adult series from the start, rather than try to parasitically leech off the audience size and ratings of children's animation. That having been said, it is always an adjustment period when Medrano's work tries to get dramatic, because I have to contend with the fact that every character is a bug-eyed, Burton-esque stick figure persona, and the aesthetic of the show practically screams Futurama for Reddit atheists. So when it tries to have a plot, it's like switching from fifth to reverse in a car with a missing gear shift. Hazbin Hotel picks up right where the pilot left off. Charlie's founded the hotel as a way to try to redeem sinners and let them go to heaven, with new lore suggesting that this is some kind of sleeper cell scheme, but is battling against the embittered nihilism of everyone currently in hell who don't actually believe redemption is possible, and also just kind of like the mindless hedonism. Charlie gets the chance to meet with the angels who just committed the genocide against her people and sees this as a chance to really get heaven on board with her redemption plan, which in terms of appealing to the moral sense of your oppressor is about as effective as yelling ceasefire at a nation that interprets war crimes as high score. The angel in question turns out to be Adam, the first human to ever walk the earth, and also a complete oh, that part was redundant. And he completely rebuffs the idea of redemption. And indeed, the first episode ends with the revelation that the next purge is coming even faster and will be a total extermination instead of just a partial one. So the thing about the pilot is that it garnered a lot of discourse for, well, hell having a surprising number of LGBT people in it, as if it was saying the gays are bad or something. That was something I held back on because just being in hell isn't really a mark against a person. The pilot established early on that there are angel purge squads who go down to hell every year to commit genocide because hell is so overpopulated with sinners. Already this tells us two things. One, hell is less a place of punishment and more of an open-air prison, and two, God's ideal method of dealing with a problem he created is genocide. See, if you've ever wondered why Christian mythology isn't as readily mined for content as Greek mythology, outside of Persona, Darksiders, and Devil May Cry, it's because Greek mythology has never really been all that shy about the fact that Zeus is a hedonistic sociopath for whom consent is a mild suggestion, while Christians keep trying to convince people that Yahweh is a noble, good, and loving God. Please ignore all that genocide and forced impregnation and that bit where he tortures a guy for laughs. Pretty much for as long as Yahweh has existed as a deity, there have been people pointing out that his actions seem less like a loving father figure and more like a schoolboy pulling the legs off a spider. Almost every story in the Old Testament involved God murdering someone he has beef with, or someone related to someone he has beef with, or someone he doesn't have beef with but just wasn't unquestionably loyal enough for his liking, or someone who just happened to be in his line of sight that day. And Christians don't so much deny these things happened, but just argue that it was actually a good thing. I covered Prince of Egypt years ago, and my big sticking point was the fact that kindly old loving Jehovah saw fit to turn a city into an open-air prison and murder a bunch of children over the actions of their unelected leaders, and a bunch of people got really angry at me for suggesting that was a bad thing. I didn't realize people in the US Foreign Policy Department watch my videos, but that's what always stuck in my head during the backlash against Hazbin Hotel's pilot. The gays being in hell is only problematic if you're operating on the assumption that God is a good and noble person, and that notion died the moment the angel purge squads showed up. Indeed, that was only confirmed by the actual release of the show, opening with the story of Lilith, the actual first woman created by God, who was banished from the Garden of Eden for not being enough of a submissive housewife to Adam. And there's no bigger sign that a work is about to take a sniper rifle to the very concept of a benevolent God than bringing up Lilith. And indeed, the story recontextualizes the actions of Lilith, Lucifer, and Eve as being noble-hearted but fervently against the stifling order of heaven, punished not so much for creating evil, for evil is just the natural consequence of free will, but for disobeying. And now the angel purge squads aren't trying to deal with overpopulation as they are culling a population before it can become big enough to rebel. What I always found interesting was that when this discourse started, the response from the fanbase was, LGBT people can still be bad people, which while technically true, always seems strange that this popped up as a defense before God is a prick and his standards for goodness are nonsense. I mean, so far, based on what we know of some of the characters before they came to hell, their sins are shit like being a gangster, being a sex worker, or being of a non-Christian religion, which in Christianity are things that do indeed get you sent to hell, but only serve as more evidence of the fact that God is a fucking wackadoodle. This seems to be the lesson Charlie is being set up to learn, that heaven operates on a very black and white doctrine that offers no opportunity for redemption, and the angels don't consider the yearly exterminations to be a professional burden. They think it's fun. They love their yearly genocide. Clearly, Adam was the US Secretary of State in life. All in all, one thing I like about Charlie is that she is portrayed as embarrassingly naive. Everyone around her, even her own girlfriend, is often skeptical of her upbeat optimism, and when she's met with failure, she's forced to reevaluate and try things a different way. Some characters, who I've resolved to stop banging on about, just keep banging their head against a wall until the narrative deems them to be at the right time to be granted victory. Here, Charlie decides, fine, I'll get a fucking sledgehammer. In the second episode, it turns out heaven just scored a home goal because the sudden panic of total extermination has made a lot of people desperate enough to try any ridiculous scheme they can. This means Charlie ends up getting at least one other patron for the hotel, and after a rocky start, things at least seem to be looking up. Charlie seems to learn that she can't force redemption on someone. They have to want it, which means things are going to be slow for her because everyone in hell is bitterly cynical and bereft of optimism. Given that later episodes deal with victims of abuse, this is an interesting hook because part of being a victim of abuse is being convinced by your abuser that things can't get better, that this is all you get, so drinking poison is better than nothing. No doubt eventually Charlie is going to have to learn that she has to play the long game, keep working with the clients she has until people look at the hotel still open and go, you know, I wonder. Nobody can keep up bitter cynicism and hopelessness forever. You either decide you don't want to be miserable anymore, or you just kill yourself. If there's going to be growth for Charlie, it'll likely be in simmering down and taking a stance of, I'll be here when you're ready, because it's hard to have growth when you're already right. Well, actually, that's not true. Charlie does need to wake up to the fact that hell's overpopulation isn't a bug, it's a feature. That heaven doesn't want demons turning to the light. They're a threat to the status quo. They always have been, a status quo where heaven gets to sit on top.
This world is a prison.
This is something that comes up as early as the next episode. After Sir Pentious is sent to infiltrate the hotel and is later caught, both Vaggie and Angel Dust want to kill him for betraying Charlie. But Charlie's a lot more pragmatic and believes that if she forgives him, he'll take the hotel more seriously, which he does. In the end, Angel, and especially Vaggie, were about to do a lot of damage to Charlie's goals, and she had to stop them. Charlie isn't revisited again until the 5th episode, where she tries to get help from her father to get an audience with angels above Adam. But her father turns out to be a few choir boys short of a molestation racket, and immediately gets into this weird paternal spat with Alastor. And that makes sense, he's an absent father suffering from depression. What's weirder is that Alastor does the same fucking thing.
I guess that's why Charlie called it the Hazbin Hotel. Ha ha ha!
Ha ha ha! It was actually my idea.
Ha ha ha! Well, it's not very clever.
Ha ha! Fuck you.
Looks like you could use some help from the big boss of hell himself. Who needs a busboy now that you got the chef?
I'm your guy, your day-to-day, your chum, your steadfast hotelier. You're like the child that I wish that I had.
What?
Boy, she can have two dads. It's double the emotional unavailability. The main conflict between Charlie and her father is between Charlie's optimism and Lucifer's nihilism. Lucifer regrets the fact that giving humanity free will caused them to shirk heaven and turn to evil. Despite his position as the king of hell, Lucifer is still an angel at heart, and he still thinks like an angel. Charlie thinks that appealing to people even higher than Adam will work, but she's literally doing that right now. Conversely, Alastor sees Charlie's ends as completely pointless as well, but at the very least is humoring her and empowering her to actually do it. She doesn't need complete faith and belief in her ideas, she just needs someone willing to help her try. And to his credit, Alastor enforces the rules of the hotel on one of his friends who used it as a safe house and brought violence to it. Ultimately, her father does come around and get her the meeting, and Charlie gets to actually go into heaven, which looks like it was designed by the Apple Store, and we learn that even the higher-ups hate that any of this happened. And if you wanted any further proof that heaven is a dystopian nightmare, the exorcists are homophobic.
To think someone as worthless as you landed Lilith's little hottie. Grats on that, I guess.
Their love is vile and blasphemous.
Hot as fuck, though.
Hell, I didn't even need to go that far. The extermination is kept secret from most of the people in heaven because it would obviously be unpopular, and the angels are proving to be about as virtuous as slugs. Like I mentioned above, Charlie is ultimately getting the wake-up call that the system has set everyone up for failure, and so she's going to have to reevaluate her plans, and that's going to be interesting to see play out. And she is ultimately proven right. After he dies defending the hotel, Sir Pentious' soul is booted upstairs, and he gets to go to heaven. Like, damn. Serpentious. And he wasn't even part of the pitch. Good on you, you adorable snack boy. I actually really like Serpentious. He's a fucking delight. Moving on to Vaggie. Like in the pilot, Vaggie continues to be my favorite character. It might be because I've written several characters that fit the same mold, but I love how she is simultaneously a take no prisoners girl boss and also an insufferable simp. In the pilot, Vaggie was rightfully criticized for her explosive anger, feeding into harmful stereotypes, as she's supposed to be Latin. And in the show itself, it seems she's cooled off a lot, and her personality is more sardonic. Still violently protective of Charlie, but not flying off the handle at people and scowling the way she used to. In truth, I have mixed feelings about her new personality. Yes, it's good that she's not a racist caricature anymore, but I feel like there could have been more done with her than just making her sarcastic. We're kinda overflowing on sarcastic characters. After Baldur's Gate 3, I think we flooded the snarking at you based economy. But that's small potatoes. Vaggie's story isn't as in-depth at the moment as Charlie or Angel Dust. In the third episode, she's given control of a trust exercise, but because the group is not immediately responsive, she starts getting anxious that she's not doing well by Charlie, because doing well by Charlie is really all she has. Vaggie's devotion to Charlie and her insistence on making Charlie's dreams a reality are, if we're being honest, the only string to her bow. She's not really got a lot going on beyond that. This makes her simple, but it doesn't make her bad. I quite like characters whose primary driving motivation is devotion, whether that devotion is healthy, unhealthy, or unhealthy but dealing with it in a healthy way. That's how I handle most of my relationships, both romantic and platonic. Now in the pilot, Vaggie's backstory was that she was a gay sex worker who went to hell for murdering one of her clients for being abusive. That was controversial, but that's gone from her character now, and for good reason. See, in the pilot, when they show all the angels, all of them have an X over one eye, and Vaggie also has an X over one eye, so I just kind of assumed for the last 5 years that she's actually an angel. Lo and behold, I was right the entire time. In the 6th episode, it's revealed to the audience, and then later Charlie, that Vaggie was an angel taking part in the yearly extermination, but who was cast out for sparing the life of a child. Vaggie had been keeping this a secret from Charlie because Charlie is completely heartbroken by the yearly extermination, and Vaggie had taken part in it multiple times, so when she finds out at the end of the episode, she is understandably devastated. At time of writing, this has ended on a cliffhanger, with a lot of people concerned that this will mean the two will split up. However, I don't think it will. I think Charlie will be furious for being lied to, but given that her whole deal is her insistence that people can change and that the angels can be convinced of that, finding out that her girlfriend was her first real success in both of those things, and that further success will only engender more faith in her cause will, I assume at least, end up being a positive thing for the both of them. Sure, they will likely split for a little while, but I doubt that such a thing will be permanent. People like Charlie and Vaggie's relationship, and for all of Medrano's flaws as a writer, she doesn't really strike me as a dick. And that intuition proved to be right. They were apart for one episode, and then they came to an understanding after doing some soul searching. People were telling me that they were afraid the whole thing would be this protracted relationship drama, and like, it's an 8-episode season. Nothing is protracted. Furthermore, that's just not how most people write relationships. That's just your weird thing. Moving on to Angel Dust, of all the characters in the show, Angel Dust is the most interesting to talk about, because when he first showed up, he was immediately critically panned for just being the slutty and gay sass boy that feels like he walked right out of a Family Guy sketch.
Oh, hey, Eric. Hiya. What's happening, boyfriend?
But shortly afterward, they released a music video about him blowing shit up with Cherry Bomb that had a few flashes of him crying, and people started to come around on him. I took a little while longer. Hints had been dropped in the 2nd episode that Angel's association with his employer, Valentino, was an abusive situation. Angel had stopped living at the porn studio and chose to live in Charlie's hotel as a way to get some respite from Valentino. He doesn't leave completely because he can't, because his soul belongs to him, because that's how hell works. Because of this, he is being relentlessly pursued by Valentino, who keeps leaving messages to come back that flip back and forth between being extremely angry and trying to pretend to be nice. A typical abuse tactic of trying to be warm and welcoming before snapping right back to rage when it doesn't get you what you want. A tactic I have been subjected to about 750,000 times throughout my life. It isn't until the 4th episode when he's called back into work that any of this starts to go anywhere. Charlie goes to try and get him time off, only for Valentino to assume that Angel is trying to use the Princess of Hell as a cudgel against him, and absolutely flies off the handle. It's here that we see Charlie and Angel's friendship is a lot more genuine than we come to expect, as when Charlie sees Valentino pushing Angel around, she becomes immediately enraged by it, and probably would have fucking killed Valentino had Angel not gotten in the way. At the end of the episode, they have this really heartfelt moment together that's just
Right?
I'm so sorry, Angel. I promise I won't ever,
Charlie, it's fine. I get it. Thanks for caring about me.
Oh, I really like their friendship now. The rest of the episode actually deals with the way Angel tries to act like he's in control when people take advantage of him in this self-destructive bullshit cycle, as being trapped in a contract to Valentino means he's scraping for any sense of autonomy he can find, even if that means seeing someone trying to drug him and just letting it happen. For the third time, I find myself deeply relating to a character who is being abused and yet trying desperately to convince themselves that they have any control of the situation. Angel is on this self-destructive bullshit cycle out of an idea that if he breaks himself enough, then Valentino won't want to break him anymore, that he'll lose interest, and that was a sentiment that made me flash back to being 14 years old and praying that the person extorting me would come to think I wasn't fun to hurt anymore before I became any more insane. I have heard rumblings from Twitter, ever the place where nuance and reading comprehension goes to die, that this episode glorifies Angel's abuse, but either Twitter's gotten even dumber since I left, or my ADHD bitch ass completely missed something, because there is nothing glorifying about Angel's abuse. Speaking as a victim of the kind of psychological and sexual abuse Angel's going through, all of his scenes were viscerally hard to watch, and his breakdown actually triggered an adolescent PTSD flashback. I think what they're talking about is Poison, a big bombastic musical number where Angel sings about how, I know this is bad, but I'm just so addicted. But the entire time, that self-destructive attitude is constantly breaking, right down to the point where at the very end, Angel just collapses on the balcony crying for all of this to stop. I'm sorry guys, but the entire episode is about how Angel's decadent hedonism is a fucking lie he tells everyone, including himself, to feel a sense of control. These are the same people, mind, who often whine about the death of media literacy because someone like me pointed out something in a work that they completely missed and they can't deal with that. I have said in the past to be wary of someone who looks at actual romanticized abuse and says, oh well, I'm a survivor of this, so inject it straight into my veins actually. I said this about people who claim to be abuse survivors who thought Cachadora was true love instead of two people getting caught in the abusive power plays of their mother. I said this about people who claim to be incestuous abuse survivors shipping Andrew with his abuser instead of cheering on the ending where he gets to cut her damn throat. But this is the opposite of glorified. Romanticized, well, yes, but anything that is meant to be consumed for entertainment is going to romanticize something to an extent because it has to be entertaining. And the thing about abuse is that it's actually quite boring and undramatic. Someone who is actually trying to cope with an inescapable situation doesn't really sing about how they're doing that. People who trauma bond might be on some level aware they're being abused, but they haven't really accepted it. Even abusive relationships still have to go through the 5 stages of grief. In a single episode, Angel has gone from a joke character to a far more real and visceral depiction of an abuse victim than I've ever seen, right down to actively rebuffing someone who looked at him and thought, I can fix him, not realizing that he has to want to be fixed first. He has to believe things can actually be better, and part of being abused is being constantly psychologically battered with the notion that it just can't be. I've said this before, and that characters who put a mask on their feelings are great, but the audience has to see that mask crack with relatively quickly. Without this episode, Angel Dust is obnoxious. With it, he's obnoxious with purpose. Hell, with it, Charlie's line in the first episode about not wanting to exploit him and then cringing when Angel yammers on about how he was made to be exploited carries a much different air to it. I'm kind of iffy on the first 3 episodes, but this one is so good. More stuff like this, please. More genuine, heartfelt sentiment to it. The entire show suffers from a problem I've talked about before in its sentimental moments being ruined by a need to keep sarcastically rolling its eyes. But you don't need to sarcastically eye roll against anything that might come off as cringe. You don't need self-protective irony. People already like you. I adore this shit. I want Angel to get free. I want him to be happy. Please let him get free of his abuser. This one is the first one that really hits its stride because it stays focused on a single topic without drifting away from it like the 3 before it do. If there's anything to take from this, it's that this should be the model moving forward. Focus on telling one part of the story at a time instead of trying to weave this complicated narrative together. You're a series with separate episodes. Learn to compartmentalize. That's the advantage of a series. It's still too early to really judge Angel Dust, however. Madrano was kind of like Rebecca Sugar, where there's a 50-50 chance of this story turning out to be the best thing you've ever seen, or being the most poorly executed nightmare shit show in the universe. But there's enough to make me file him into the same box of, okay, I'll see where you're going with this. All in all, what little of the show there is pretty good. I've heard rumblings from people that the show runs too fast and introduces too many characters to keep track of, as most of the wider cast is backported from Madrano's comics and other shows, but but I honestly think that's not a real problem. There's a phenomenon in fandom that I'm going to call the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross problem. In Kingdom Hearts 3, there's a bit toward the end where Sora gets help from the long-dead army of Keyblade wielders to finally kill the Demon Tide after 2 games of it annoying the shit out of you. Now, to hardcore fans, this means you had to finish Union Cross. Otherwise, this wouldn't make sense. However, even if you hadn't played it, by this point, most people knew about the Keyblade War and what all those old keys represent, and in case you're particularly stupid, the game just tells you.
What was that?
Keyblade wielders. From long ago.
In the eyes of the fandom, small details become massive, earth-shattering revelations that require intense record-keeping. This is part of the way fandom likes to act exclusive. So when a character from Hell of a Boss shows up, you need to know that character's entire deal, or their moment on screen won't make any sense. However, most people aren't stupid and can infer the necessary information from context alone, especially regarding characters whose roles are small and whose presence isn't significant. Most people will just disappear the characters that aren't at present important to the story into the memory hole until the story needs them again. And they won't need a refresher because people's memories aren't as bad as you think they are. It's that point where fandom and what they consider important brushes up against reality. If a character only appears for one scene, that character isn't important. If a character's main focus is their rivalry with a main character, we just accept that it'll come up later. This even extends to characters who are important. Watching some other videos on Hazbin Hotel, the amount of time we need to spend with a character is disproportionately small compared to the amount of time the hardcore fans seem to think is necessary. Valentino, for example, is seen in other Vivziepop work, and he's a real bastard, but the reasons why he's such a shit don't take a whole lot to explain. I mean, they made him look like a pimp, so 90% of the work is already done. But his abuse of angel dust is handled in exactly 2 scenes, and you get it. Visual media does this shit all the time and has done it for decades. I think fandom is just so accustomed to shows taking 12 episodes to go through 2 episodes of story that just using basic visual storytelling now seems like speedrunning. Reading through the complaints about the show moving too fast, telling and not showing, and leaving questions unanswered, I'm finding myself increasingly asking, who the fuck cares? Who cares if the overlords are underdeveloped? Were some people really expecting some massive lore dump for every character the moment they appear? There's this really bitchy meme passed around Tumblr a few days ago saying that Medrano doesn't really care about the lore, and it glosses over the point to just be catty because being a cow is just what people think a personality is now. But it is true. They don't care about lore. Not in the way fandom does. No writer cares about lore the way fandom does. I know animation fandom has gotten it into their heads that lore dumps and wiki padding is how you write a good story, partially because the 2010s flooded us with shows doing exactly that. But like, most people don't. At all. Most of the show relies on cultural osmosis to do the work for them. You don't need to know who Lucifer, Lilith, Adam, Sarah, or Emily are, because you already know who they are. This is why people base stories in mythology in the first place. Most writers would rather get to the story and characters before they fuss over lore. Lore always came second to the main characters in the plot. Lore is something fans obsess over and annoy the creators with, and it's why everyone hates hardcore fans. Also continuity. I recognize I'm shouting into the void here, as I've now spent 11 years trying to convince the people around me that their obsession over lore is causing them to miss the entire point. Most of the additional characters and overlords existed to set up plot threads for Season 2, as their entire existence was to make it clear that once it got out that angels could be killed, there would be an inevitable power grab. Then they fend off a ton of angels in the season finale, and now the overlords are plotting a power grab. This is all stuff that you would get and you would understand if you didn't have your fucking nose in the dirt trying to analyze a blade of grass. No writer worth their salt is going to sacrifice plot and characters for lore. They never will. It's the first thing that's beaten out of you in any writing course. And most writers just don't care. They got into it to make a show about their characters or to tell a story, and your incessant desire to build the world and flesh out every single meaningless background character, like the brony fandom on ketamine, has always fallen on deaf ears. The first thing you do in a show with only 8 episodes a season is you cut the shit that doesn't matter. I have been saying this for 11 years, and I'm so tired of saying it. Just grow up. Fucking grow up. We've been having this stupid fly the Eagles to Mordor argument for 69 fucking years, to the total indifference of the entire entertainment industry. Just get the fuck over it and stop acting like a work not focusing on the tertiary shit that only you care about is some kind of objective problem. The series isn't going to be about the metaphysics of hell. Either start getting over it or stop watching, because continuing to watch while having such a warped notion of how storytelling works is only going to piss you off. Now, I believe that covers everything important. Alastor, Husk, Nifty, and the rest of the cast haven't shown anything significant enough outside of playing support to other characters and just leaving these weird Chekhov's guns all over the place.
Oh wait, you forgot about the suspense.
Suspense?
There was a big soap opera on the bird. It has so many twists and turns.
Bonnie, why are you getting into Twitter drama?
I gotta know what happens next. I gotta know every... Hey!
Okay, so like any creator who puts their name out there, Medrano was subjected to a bombardment of smear campaigns almost immediately, because the internet is the embodiment of crabs in a bucket. And I say smear campaigns because often Medrano was being accused of serious crimes, yet the accusers were decidedly not reporting her and instead plastering it all over social media, which is immediately suspicious. I'm not going to cover a whole lot of the Vivziepop drama. Criminal allegations belong in a court, and the allegations about Crunch, unionize. Animators should unionize. This has been a problem in the independent scene and big budget releases. Crunch is all over the animation industry. Animators need to unionize, showrunners and directors are not your friends, and drooling into your phone with the Twitter app open isn't going to fix the systemic rot of unchecked capitalism. Medrano has been accused of everything from exploiting her workers to racism, to transphobia, to pedophilia, because where there is any internet drama surrounding a public figure, there will inevitably be a pedophilia accusation. That's the free space on YouTube drama bingo. If I sound like I'm not taking this seriously, it's because I'm not. Most of these accusations came out 5 years ago and have been disproven time and time again. Did you hear the one about Medrano making a pedophilic couple in her webcomic? No, you didn't, because that never fucking happened. Someone just fucking lied and put the burden of proof on everyone else to keep disproving it for the end of time, because most people didn't actually check. Some people call this misinformation. I won't call it that because it is a lie. They just heard the lie, took it at face value, and repeated the lie elsewhere. So this lie keeps getting repeated despite it being a lie that has been proven to be a lie. Let's be clear about something here. No creator, big or small, is going to be deplatformed by you gossiping about some drama they are or were in every time their name crosses your timeline. You're just sad. As is the case with most astroturfing campaigns. As time went on and the more serious complaints gained no traction, they just kept getting pettier and pettier. I mean, the last one I saw before I just blocked any mention of Vivziepop were people complaining she was objectifying her own characters with a series of pin-up pins, taking her characters, some of whom are sexual abuse survivors, and reducing them to sexy drawings. Now, this is the only one I found worth engaging with because it was recent and touched on an issue we always tend to sidestep. Some people found it gross that Medrano was objectifying her characters for profit, but what's left unspoken about it is the fact that a lot of people were objectifying her characters for profit. The fact is that if anyone should be allowed to do this, it should be a character's creator. The discussion about whether or not it's classy on the macro scale is a different discussion entirely, but this is a series for adults. It'd be one thing if Cartoon Network started selling pinups of lapis lazuli, but they're not. There are legitimate criticisms to be made of Medrano and her work, but trying to do that is a nightmare because you have to wade through a bunch of squawking morons trying to make their very personal beef with someone into something everyone else should care about. I clocked a long time ago that most of the drama came from artists who were mad about the art style where everyone's a gray, skinny Tumblr silly guy. And that bitter rage only fermented as time went on. I have never seen someone go on a sustained rant about this woman who wasn't also an artist. The earliest Vivziepop drama came from people professing to improve the character designs. All these parasocial hatreds have a seed, the thing that actually pissed someone off, through which they need to layer all kinds of increasingly escalating bullshit onto someone in order to make their petty nonsense seem more legitimate. This is why it sometimes seems like some people have no reading comprehension. If the claim about Angel's abuse being fetishized because of one storyboarder on staff sounded weird to you, it's highly likely that that person just repeated it from someone else who deliberately viewed it in as poor a light as possible because what they're actually angry about is something else entirely. I've been subjected to this for the last few years. I know how parasocial mobs work, and this is supremely parasocial. I had to stage an intervention for one of my friends because they were letting their hatred of Medrano consume their fucking life. This shit ain't healthy, and the way some obsessive weirdos go to increasing lengths to ruin someone's life over the pettiest garbage is fucking absurd. A few videos ago, we covered a crappy visual novel, and 2 days before the video was supposed to air, the creator was doxxed and had to go into hiding, so the comments were filled with something I couldn't have accounted for. And the game itself was ultimately so fucking mid that the idea that anyone would go on that kind of warpath is fucking comical. Doxing in general is a really pathetic thing that teenagers online feel way too comfortable doing, but doxing over this? You're so entrenched in online discourse, it's starting to dilute your perception of what an actual problem is. However, there is one issue worth taking seriously, and I promised myself and a viewer I'd work this in, but so far I haven't found a natural way to segue into it. One issue with the pilot that was underspoken about was the way the radio demon uses Veves from Haitian Vodou. Vodou is an extremely demonized religion, and in pop culture is often used as a free idea bucket when writers want to find something to tie a villain to. In the actual release, Alastor doesn't have immediately recognizable Veves swirling around him, but after consulting with an actual practitioner of Vodou, they said they were still the same symbols, just cut up and altered so that they look different and won't invite a spirit with a genie sense of humor into your house, which isn't actually all that different at all. Furthermore, the fanbase, being a fanbase and therefore more illiterate than a ball-peen hammer, decided this wasn't a real problem and that it was only terminally online Twitter bitches causing a fuss. So basically, well, the antis are ruining our fun. The thing is, most Western white people are, or come from, a Christian or pseudo-Christian background. One of the key driving forces behind Christianity is spreading the faith and converting as many people as possible. Christians want everyone to be Christian. Historically, Christians will make you be Christian. Or else. Other religions, however, are more exclusive, more culture-bound, tired of outsiders treating their beliefs like a spiritual novelty shop. It's theirs, and they often don't want it spread to a wider audience. Some might argue that being introduced to more people would work against demonization, but just on my own perspective, after spending my entire life seeing what people do with Greek mythology, I can certainly understand practitioners of any other faith deciding that is the last thing they would want. These are people's cultures and homes, and they shouldn't be treated as an entry on a mood board. Some would argue, well, he's from New Orleans and was black in life, and putting aside the issue of why the fuck is he a deer then, the truth of the matter is that the character's background doesn't really matter. You shouldn't be using cultural symbols as part of an aesthetic, and you definitely shouldn't be doing it with Veves. I mean, I started reading about Haitian Vodou with the intention of making it part of a character's background, and the more I read, the more I came to the realization that this was so beyond my ken that I really just shouldn't do this. This really isn't something that should be played around with, at least not without having a practitioner on staff. It's not enough to have characters as representation if you're not also hiring people to represent themselves. And also, if you're one of the people who's thinking of getting one of these tattooed on your body, don't do it! For the love of fucking God, don't do it! And with that, I think that covers everything. Everything worth covering. A lot of it is still undeveloped, but to my pleasant surprise, this is a show that puts a lot into each episode. They feel longer than they actually are because they don't waste time and they conclude every story they set up in the same episode before spending the last 5 minutes setting up the next episode. So I'm quite looking forward to more of it. So what I said in the last video doesn't hold true. Hazbin Hotel is exactly what I was hoping it would be. It doesn't light the world on fire, but I never really wanted it to light the world on fire. And if you're upset that I thought the whirlwinds of drama surrounding it wasn't worth bringing up, then please feel free to discuss that somewhere that isn't here.